Today's philosophy is brought to you by Lucretius. In the 1st century before Christ, he wrote Tantum religio potuit suadore malorum, which translated into modern day English says, to such height of evils are men driven by religion. We're in Dover and we're in the old St. James Church in James's Street. That's clearly the altar up there, open air altar. And Dover's a place where Thomas Paine, if you've ever read Thomas Paine, or if you know of Thomas Paine, he was a remarkable man, and he came from Thetford, and when he left Dover and English soil for the last time, as he sailed out from Dover, he looked back and he knew it was the last time there would ever be on his home soil. He ultimately became an American and played a role in the French Revolution when there was a vote to see if they should execute King Louis XVI, Thomas Paine voted against it, said that it was unreasonable to do such a thing. And right next to St. James's is the White Horse Inn. This is the hotel where if you swim the English Channel, you can write your name on the wall. We're going to go inside and have lunch there today. I was going to ask you, because you're talking about all these additions out here, when did they first start burrowing under the channel? That was in the 1800s, wasn't it?
There's different schools of thought on that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the complete history of it, but there's been quite a few attempts at it. But
the channel that we've got now, but I once read that we first tried to burrow under the channel back in the 1800s, and the French burrowed from the other side, and it was uncanny that they were within inches of one another, which was remarkable given Churchill came down here once, not have his name tag with being rejected. Have you heard that one?
No. Obviously you've been reading too quick.
We are right up on the cliffs of Dover. You can see down here all the trucks arriving from France. 30 kilometres over the channel there is Dunkirk, and under the Vice Admiral Ramsay there was that major extraction of all the troops from Dunkirk, which was a hell of a logistical effort. The last time I was here a couple of years ago, I made a couple of videos about the war effort and the role that all the rabbit warren of tunnels behind us played in that, and I didn't give much attention to Dover Castle itself. So today I want to put a focus on Dover Castle. You know, one of the most amazing things about Dover Castle is its longevity. Not the castle itself, but this particular place. Right now I'm standing inside a Roman lighthouse that was built in the 1st century. That means it was built between the birth of Christ and 100 years AD. The very top of it was reconstructed in the 14th century, so you can see from the outside that there are some changes in it. And this here, right next to it, unusual that they built the church so close to it, but that is St. Mary in Castro Church, which was built during the Saxon period, so considerably later than the Roman lighthouse. That's the Roman lighthouse there, and the bit up the top there was rebuilt in the 14th century, and there's St. Mary's in Castro. Remarkable church. We're allowed to go inside and film, so let's go in and have a look. Notice how the building juts out to have wings on either side. I don't know if you've ever noticed that most churches and cathedrals have this, and that is because from above it is the shape of a cross. Inside the keep of Dover Castle, they've got a well, and it is so deep that it takes about 10 seconds for the water to reach the bottom. I didn't pour much in there, but if you listen for it, you'll hear the noise come back up in a moment. It's a pretty long drop.
Excellent.
So here we are in the keep of Dover Castle. This was completed in 1185 by King Henry II. He was the first Plantagenet king. His stepfather was Geoffrey Plantagenet, so named because he had the yellow flower in his hair. And his mother was Eleanor of Aquitaine. That's where the bloodline came through. So King Henry II was he was a big, barrel-chested man, rather short, and ended up rather bowed-legged by the end of his life from all the horse riding. He had a couple of kids who were apparently very recalcitrant by nature, and often acted with a great deal of subterfuge because they wanted to overthrow their own father in order to claim their right to the throne. One of those was King Richard, who, when he became king in 1189, he spent most of his 10 years as king off in the Middle East on crusade fighting against Saladin. Then, after his reign, came King John. He was the king for 17 years, which included the signing of the Magna Carta. We spoke about him the other day when we were out at Runnymede. This is the great hall in which King Henry II used to hold court. So he used to sit up at this end of the building, and quite often he would pace around because he wasn't a fan of sitting. So he would constantly walk, pacing back and forth. And when he'd throw tantrums, he'd throw himself on the ground and put balls of hay into his mouth when he was upset. There was always straw and hay across the floor, which was their kind of carpet. Now we've just got wood here, but back in the day, they'd take all that straw and hay out when it got filled with food and blood and human waste. The one thing that I always remember about King Henry II, which I thought was interesting, was that because he was always feuding with his own children, just before he passed away, he said to his son, "My only regret is that I won't live to exact my revenge on you." And then he passed. So, sorry, Sue, you were telling us this is Edward the Confessor.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know how we were talking about beds being straw in the
Yes.
12th century rather than feathers? What is the quilt cover made out of?
That is some squirrel. The fur is squirrel, and as I understand it, I believe it's Siberian squirrel.
Siberian squirrel.
Yes.
It looks nice and soft.
It does, doesn't it? Yes.
So everything in this room you were saying is a replica.
Yes.
Yeah. I read that the king used to travel with an entourage who would bring his bed,
Yes.
set it up for the night, dismantle it the next
Yeah,
morning
so
and take it
Thomas
away.
Becket died in 1170. He was canonised, and so people, very important people from abroad, overseas, came over to go on pilgrimage to his shrine at Canterbury Cathedral. And so obviously the most likely place to land was Dover, but there was no castle here that could accommodate a king. And
Yeah.
so he, as I understand it, had to go. Met on the beach, and
Yeah.
taken off to a manor house in Wye, which is near Ashford, for the night because there was nowhere to accommodate him. And it was 1179, 1180 that Henry II started to build the castle here to show that he was trying to show his power, his authority, his wealth, to impress people coming
I
here.
have no doubt that he was showing off. It was King Louis VII that came over
Yeah.
from France, wasn't it? And he used to be married to King Henry II's wife, Eleanor of
Yes.
Aquitaine. So there would have been bad blood between the two, yet they go to Canterbury Cathedral, travel together
Yeah.
to the shrine of St Thomas Becket. Yeah,
As far as-
it's
yeah.
hard to imagine them hanging out with one another.
Well-
You know, it's hanging out with your wife's ex-husband. I thought it was. So we're inside the chapel that is inside the Dover Castle Keep, and apparently this morning they had a service in here. This room would be about the size of a single car garage. Yeah?
This one?
Yeah. Well, welcome to the roof of Dover Castle. Where did we stay last night, Ma?
See the camper van down there on the street? That's us.
Oh, there's my bedroom window.
Yeah.
King Edward III renovated Dover Castle and he put in these fireplaces. And up on the corner here, interesting to note that there is a white Yorkist rose. Obviously it predates the Tudor rose, but it's got the sun shining out of it. And that was because leading into the Battle of Mortimer's Cross, King Edward III saw 3 suns rising over the Yorkist army. I wonder what happened on this day in history.
3rd of December 1586, Sir Thomas Harriot introduced potatoes to England from Colombia. I didn't know that. Also December 3rd in 1854, Eureka Stockade, in which is claimed by many to be the birthplace of Australian democracy. More than 20 gold miners at Ballarat, Victoria were killed by state troopers over an uprising of mining licences.